I know on some levels it looks kind of strange, huh? Wearing the camo and the jacket. This is a nice smoking jacket. I found it outside. I want to apologize. I was born in the United States of America. I've traveled to a couple of other places, but I'm American. And as much as other things happen and they make me upset, I know I'm American, which means there's a responsibility, but there's also possibilities. It's one of the things about the history of communism in America specifically. A lot of times, the history of communism was associated with people that were born in other countries and then came to the United States after they had learned about workers' struggle or they had been organized or given some incipient understanding of class consciousness in their countries of origin, and then for whatever reason had to come to the United States. It's part of what led to a flourishing of so many different periodicals for a very specific period of time in the United States, what you might call the first mass literacy program. As much as it may be recapitulated or recharacterized later, that is a very important part of American history. But, there was something about capitalist development in the United States specifically that gave the United States a very significant burden, but also possibility. And the fact that people would be born in the United States, including after many generations removed from immigrants, maybe even going all the way back to the days of having to debate what to do about efforts to try to compel people to accept slavery as a legitimate economic system, efforts to try to compel people to accept a sort of degradation of the indigenous people, identified in some varying ways as being savages, while the modern military techniques that were being employed by the people who had come to the country as part of various kinds of military training and techniques may or may not be equally reviled as savage. Right? All these things, this is part of the uniqueness of the American experience, and in the context of the fact that, relatively speaking, American national identity is pretty young unless there are certain procedural matters that are being considered, like constitutionalism. So all of these things give the United States a very specific experience. But I want to apologize very profusely, especially if you weren't born in the United States. But even if you were, see, 2008, this situation was happening. I was poor. I had no money. I was living in a church. I was living with people, a lot of whom were not born in the United States, not officially acknowledged as citizens, at least not at the time. But something told me that I was meant to run for office, right? I worked on a campaign with a political candidate, and something said, you know what, you're supposed to be president one day. You can be president. It's part of your heritage, it's part of your legacy. You have what it takes to be president. In a couple of years, next term, a couple terms later, you're meant to be president of the United States. And for a while, I believed that, even though I was in a, unconventional space. I said to myself, how can somebody in my material circumstances ever be president? I didn't go to college. I don't have a fancy family. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a campaign machine. What I do know of these electoral machines, to be honest with you, I don't really like much, and I wouldn't want to use in my campaign. And by the way, a majority of the people right now in my life are not eligible to vote. At least not yet, right? I mean, because there are legitimate legal ways that one can engage with the society, and people previously not eligible to vote can become eligible to vote, right? I mean, that's the history of the United States. But, additionally was a very specific understanding in the United States that concepts of socialism or communism as they applied elsewhere in the world were not relevant in the American context specifically, especially if you were somebody born in this country and had a specific kind of experience of American identity and American geopolitical positioning. See, I'm one of those people that took it seriously, that there is an evolutionary process. And when you functionally do not have the means by which to distribute to all equitably, you necessarily have to go through some sort of process of economic development in order to develop the means. But it's not just the actual mechanical means and tangible means of distributing commodities. It's also the intangible. The capacity to engage in making decisions, a capacity to identify yourself in a context of understanding an interest you have that meets with somebody else's, and how to negotiate and how to apply appropriate protocols or standards so that if there's other areas you disagree on, you can find a way to work together on necessary issues, including ones that have to do with national security. And the United States is at least one of two, if not the biggest warehousers of nuclear weapons on the planet. No matter who you are, once you get involved with America, at some point you have to confront that. You can't la your way into pretending that's not a reality, and you can't just go around demonizing everybody else for the fact it already exists. If you really want to have anything to do, honestly, with that situation, you have to acknowledge it. And it's not the kind of thing that anybody should be allowed to speculate on. And it's certainly not the kind of thing and people should allow leveraging children or the beauty or the abundance and the wealth of children in order to acquire. See, that's one of the things we haven't learned yet in the United States, the richest country, the greatest consumers on the planet. We have the means to not exploit children. And until we get that, we lack the material preconditions to start discussing things from some concept of socialism or some concept of communism. Even if other countries believe that they are in a situation where they can have some sort of socialist society. Do you want to destroy America altogether? Well, here's the situation. You want to destroy America. Okay. See, I understand at some point somebody said, I'm America, and they're going to destroy me. Literally. I think there were a group of people that said, we're going to make charity America and we're going to destroy her. And I'm like, well, what America are you talking about? Because the America you're talking about is a foreign figment. It is a foreign projection onto the United States that does not understand the material conditions necessary to accomplish the kind of goals or the kind of mission that foreigners say needs to be accomplished. Allowing a bunch of rich boys to go to boarding schools and hook up honeypots all over the place and curry deals with them while you make a couple token sacrifices down the food chain to pay your tax commitments so they can create a new world order with socialist characteristics. It's not socialism. It's not communism. It's something else. And it's wholly 100% un-American. Just letting you know. I believe that national self-determination is the first step toward a collective identification of self-interest. It's a very basic component. Does not mean that you don't get pan-nationalist. Hey, that's great. But if you're going to make me the American, then you got to deal with it in its full complexity. See, I actually at some point was on currents where I believed I was going to be president one day. It wasn't about ego. It was about a very big commitment and a very big understanding and a very big love. It didn't make sense on one hand. But now, years later, how many other people in this country believe that maybe they're supposed to be the president? Or maybe they're supposed to be in Congress? Or maybe they're supposed to be involved in politics locally? And then are told it's not for them, it's for somebody else. I'm not supposed to be the president. But I'm supposed to comport myself with a certain decorum and problem solve so that somebody who thinks they're entitled to be the president can spy on me and steal it and credit it for themselves. I'm not supposed to be a senator, but somebody who is now is supposed to be able to spy on me and take whatever I do and create it the way they like and then claim it as their own. Do you know how many pieces of proposed legislation I gave to somebody else, understanding that if they had engaged a good faith effort in trying to negotiate the elements of that legislation on the level they were at, namely a member of Senate, then certain very significant national security perils that impacted the United States and the rest of the world would have been prevented. And what happened instead is there was some announcement that someone had hacked the government. And then the next time it came up, she was some stripper. Okay. Because what you're telling me is that the only way you're going to let a woman be the president is if she's a stripper hacker. Is that the truth? The only woman you would accept in the office of the chief executive of the United States is a stripper hooker? Because apparently that's what you're getting. Now that was your characterization, not mine. And if you're somebody that felt like you were meant for public service and you have the capacity to do it and you have the desire to do it in good faith and you're not interested in trying to hook up some patronage kickback machine that gives padding to a bunch of bureaucrats that haven't delivered to this day, and are willing to cede or try to romanticize your way into allowing for sexual exploitation to be our primary currency, I support you, even if somebody else keeps trying to take your power and claim it as their own. That's not Republican representation. Sexual exploitation and illegal expropriation is not American. They're occupiers. They're occupiers who took over the land and tried to make a justification for slavery. That's unfortunately a very big part of the American legacy. You know that? Opportunists who lacked the character to deliver on their own, exploiting other people, branding them as their property, and using their expertise to justify their position. It's also the history of capitalism. It's also the history of anti-colonialist struggle. It's the only history that has any value, and that's why they keep trying to dispossess us of it. But if it's your history, I just want you to know that I support you. And I look forward to getting this done.